So earlier this week, I arrived back from what I would say was the biggest trip of my life. I decided to go solo backpacking around Europe, and it was a really interesting trip. I really enjoyed it. But coming back has taught me a lot about life, it's taught me a lot about the UK society as a whole, and it's given me a lot to think on and reflect on. So why not upload that to YouTube? I know we have a lot of people on YouTube who like to talk negatively about the UK or the West. And there's a lot of things that I've learned, specifically when I was in Eastern Europe and Northeast Europe as well, that I have the ability to talk about, which are better than the UK. At the same time, my trip has shown me a lot of things which are comparatively worse. And it's given me a broader perspective on how life is in the UK, some good things and some bad things. And I want to share today a video as to why the West is still the best for your average person. Now, I understand just by the nature of a video like this, I'm going to get some people who don't like this sentiment. I'm going to get some people who live exceptional lives and say, I can have a better life in Thailand. I can have a better life in, I don't know, Latvia or somewhere in Eastern Europe where I just was. I can have a better life in Africa. And of course, that is going to be true for some people. I'll give you the example of me. I'm an online business owner. That's what I do. I make enough money, so I can say that's my job, for want of a better phrase, right? I have a few online businesses and it makes me enough money to live on. So, in a way, that gives me a lot more flexibility. It gives me a lot more choice if I was to want to move. That is a sort of lifestyle where it can become a lot more attractive to move. That's the kind of lifestyle where it might make a lot more sense. A lot of people have this idea in their head, though, that they're going to move to a country, looking for a job, and get the same level of treatment, quality, and benefits that they would in the UK. The truth is, one thing that I learned on this trip that stood out the most is how much personal wealth we have here in the UK. Of course, not everybody, but from my trip, there are a lot of countries in Europe, specifically Eastern Europe, where things like having a Mercedes or a BMW seems to be a big deal. Here in the UK, it's like what, your average dad's car, right? It's not a massive deal at all. Pay in the UK, obviously comparative to living, it's not the best. But people have this idea in their head that they're going to move to some of these countries where the minimum wage is like what, 4, 5, 6 euros. And it's going to provide them a better quality of life. As I say, there will be cases where it will. There will be cases where it absolutely won't. If you're looking for a standard life, and what I mean by that is, if you're not the sort of person who's willing to either upskill, like maybe become a teacher or get some sort of a valuable skill to a country, if you're not the sort of person who's willing to build an online business and take the risks that come with that, you are going to have a much harder time outside of the West. We've spoken about this before, but wrongly or rightly, there are a lot of social provisions in the West, but we'll speak specifically about the UK because the term the West is very sort of unanimous, which is why I use the sort of finger quotations, it doesn't really make much sense. But we'll say the UK, right? There are a lot of advantages to working here. There are a lot of advantages to living here. Are a lot of things getting worse? Yes, I'm not going to deny that. Waiting lists, housing, cost of housing, to a degree, the social aspect of life, arguably all are getting worse. At the same time, we are able to live in a world where we have our fundamental necessities taken care of if we are willing to work for it. It is not impossible to build a successful business here. We have access to the internet. We have access to information. We have access to good, or relatively okay at least, education. We have access to a lot of really, really first world provisions. Are they in some ways getting worse? Well, some of them are, some of them aren't, of course. Some of them are getting worse. Let's just say that, yeah? Some things in the UK are seriously getting bad. I agree. However, just like on my trip, I saw what it looks like to live like a rich person in Eastern Europe. Because I was travelling with quite a bit of money comparative to the average salary there. I don't say that to brag. I don't say that to sound entitled. It is what it is, right? But if you're bringing in £2,000, £3,000, £4,000, £5,000, £6,000 a month, even in the UK, that's not bad. So if you take that over to, we could go on about any country, right? In a lot of these countries where the cost of living is significantly cheaper, of course your money goes further. And this is what a lot of people show online. You can live like a king in these places for cheaper. At the same time, if you're your average person with not many transferable skills, getting these sorts of jobs are going to be difficult. Getting good pay in these sorts of jobs, or the kind of pay that would be comparative to Western countries, a lot of the time is going to be difficult. And this is a thing, right? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've just not seen enough. But based on what I saw on my relatively short trip, if I had to choose a place to be broke, I would much rather be broke in the West than anywhere else, right? I would much rather be broke in the UK than be broke in Eastern Europe. And maybe that sounds wrong to a lot of people. Maybe I just don't know any better. I'm going to hold my hands up and say, maybe that's just what it is. But it's only when you see how other people live, perhaps. It's only when you see how comparatively rich we are that you sometimes realise the privileges that we have. Does it make sense to move to Eastern European countries, to South Asian countries, to Asian countries, to African countries? Does this make sense? For some people it will. Could this make sense for everybody? Possibly. Does it make sense immediately for most people? No. Because most people do not have skills to offer these countries. Most people do not have skills to offer themselves when they get to these countries. They have this assumption, and I think it is inherently part of being from places like the UK, right? It's a privilege thing. And I'm going to say it out loud. People have this assumption that their sort of culture and work culture and societal expectations will be mirrored in other parts of the world, and it's not true. It's not true at all. There's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. That's what makes the world an interesting place. But let's think about this realistically. If you move to... I don't want to pick any country specifically because we could talk about any country. Some are going to have their benefits and drawbacks. It's that simple. But let's just say you want to move to somewhere, right? It will almost inevitably have a very different work culture, social culture, life culture, housing culture. And people don't factor this in. They hear about these amazing lives in Thailand that they can have. But how are they going to fulfill it? How are they going to make it work financially? Because the job out there, some of them will pay well. Of course they will. Some of them will pay more. But most of them will not. So that's the first thing. The next thing is most people are not on the road to trying to free themselves. Sure, if you get £2,000-3,000 a month, maybe Thailand's a much better bet. Probably it is. But we're not talking about £2,000-3,000 from your office job. We need £2,000-3,000 that I can make here, that I can make in Spain, that I can make in Thailand, that I can make on the moon, anywhere with an internet connection. And this is obviously why I'm so pro online business, because it does give you that flexibility. But let's be honest, I'm not saying it in a bad way, it's just the truth. How many of you guys have an online business? I have a few. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just highlighting an important fact here, right? If you don't have an online business or some online money making, remote money making, you are not going to be able to have this quality of life over there. You will be getting the same minimum wage or average wage or comparative wage probably over the locals. And the locals don't live like that. Like what you see on TikTok, like what you see on Instagram. It's the richer people. And sure, richer in the UK might be 10 grand a month, right? Let's be honest, if you make 10 grand a month in the UK, you're probably fairly well off. That's good. Rich in Thailand or any other country might be 2,000, 3,000, 5,000. I don't want to put a number on it because I know some people are going to be in the comments like, that's not right. You need more money. Okay, I'm just giving an example, right? Let's say in England, you need 10, 20k a month to be rich or well off. Let's say in Thailand, you need 2, 3, 4. I'm not saying the numbers are perfect, bear in mind. That's all well and good, and it makes life sound super manageable because you already make 2 grand, 3 grand a month from your office job, from your job. Cool. but you're not going to be able to transfer that wage to a shop or an office, most likely in Thailand. Not unless some serious provisions are put in place to help you move there, i.e. online business, remote working, better paid job somehow. And I don't say this to be a downer on anybody, but when we think about these situations, right, about moving to a certain place, having a better quality of life, what is the catch? And the catch is, probably, in a lot of these places, if you're rich, life's good. If you're not rich, the West is still going to be your best bet. It's going to have the best pay, the best career progression. It's where the big companies are. It's going to give you the most chances for success. But people don't want to say this online because it goes against the common narrative of, oh, the UK's in decline. There's some truth to that, but where are you going to go that's going to pay you better if you don't have skills? Some people are going to watch this and say, well, yes, but I can. Well, you've got skills. You've got skills, you've got a business, you've got an income, you can provide the country with some benefits, and in turn you will get citizenship or a visa or something. If you don't have any of these things, how are you going to have a better life than in your home country where you have all of the advantages? You know the laws, you know the regulations, you know the culture, you know the language. Any other country that you go to, provided it's not an English-speaking country, which is naturally going to be another expensive country like Canada, Australia, USA, perhaps maybe South Africa. You know, you're going to be facing similar problems there. So I'm going to assume that you're not going to an English-speaking country. You're going to have all of these issues to also face. If you want to go about moving to these places, it might make sense. If you are thinking logically about how you're going to make money, how you're going to have a better standard of life than the average. And I think this is true whether you're in the West, the East, the North, the South, whatever you want to say. It's a ball, so it doesn't really make much sense anyway. But it doesn't matter where you are on the planet, right? The point is, you should always be trying to aspire to a good life, and maybe that's more accessible in Southeast Asia, in Eastern Europe. But if you're not making any money to begin with, your strongest advantage is very likely at home.